The road that vanished overnight. The neighborhood had always been quiet, the kind of place where the sound of children's laughter carried over fences and the occasional lawn mower hummed on Saturday mornings. But that peace shattered one strange weekend when something unthinkable happened. The residents woke up to discover that the main road leading to half the neighborhood, the one everyone used to get home, had suddenly been claimed. Signs went up overnight. Private property, HOA residents only. Trespassers will be towed. It was as if the street itself had vanished, snatched away in the dead of night. At the center of it all was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. She had always been loud, demanding, and entitled, but no one expected her to go this far. With her sharp bob haircut, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard that seemed permanently attached to her hand, she strutted up and down the freshly blocked road like she was royalty patrolling her kingdom. Neighbors whispered in disbelief as they stared at the bold metal gates that had appeared. Some families were trapped inside, unable to get to work. Others had to park far away and walk just to reach their own driveways. And the smug grin on Karen's face made it worse. From now on, this road belongs to us, she declared to anyone who dared question her. HOA residents will finally get the peace and exclusivity we deserve. If you don't like it, too bad. But there was a problem. The road wasn't hers to claim. It was a shared public access street, one that had been maintained by the county for decades. Yet somehow Karen had convinced the HOA board to vote in her favor. She filed paperwork in the middle of the night, pushed it through with her lawyer friends, and by sunrise the barricades were up. For most people, that might have been the end of the story, a painful new reality forced upon them. But for one homeowner, Alex, it was just the beginning. Alex wasn't the type to shout or argue. A reserved man in his late 30s, he had chosen this neighborhood for its tranquility. But when he saw Karen grinning smugly as tow trucks prowled the street, tagging cars and hauling them away like trophies, something inside him snapped. He watched from his window as his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Turner, pleaded with Karen not to tow her car. The poor woman had parked outside for years because her garage was too small, but Karen only smirked, waved her hand, and within minutes Mrs. Turner's old sedan was being dragged off, leaving the woman in tears. Alex's jaw tightened. He could feel the injustice burning in his chest. This isn't about rules. He muttered under his breath, this is about power. Karen didn't just want order, she wanted control. And now she had weaponized the very road people depended on. Families couldn't host guests. Delivery trucks turned away. Parents struggled to drop off kids for school. Every inconvenience was fuel for Karen's delight. But Alex wasn't going to let her win. He spent the next few days observing carefully, quietly. He noticed the way Karen timed the tow trucks, the way she pounced on certain families she had personal grudges against. He noticed that while other residents complained, none dared to push back. Everyone feared the HOA penalties. But Alex had something Karen didn't expect, knowledge. His career as a civil engineer gave him a unique understanding of land rights, easements, and zoning laws. And as he began digging through old property records, he discovered something explosive. Karen's ownership of the road wasn't nearly as solid as she claimed. Still, Alex knew exposing her wouldn't be enough. Karen thrived on attention. If he went at her directly, she'd twist the narrative and paint herself as the victim. He needed to strike where it would hurt most. So he watched, he studied, and then, one night, he quietly took action. By morning, Karen stormed out of her house in her usual dramatic fashion, coffee in hand, ready to inspect the street like a queen inspecting her kingdom. But her scream pierced the neighborhood seconds later. Every single car on the road, the same cars she had proudly ticketed and claimed authority over, was gone, vanished without a trace. The street was completely empty. Karen's clipboard clattered to the ground as her jaw dropped in disbelief. Where are the cars?" she shrieked, spinning in circles as if the vehicles might suddenly appear. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering in stunned voices. Some laughed nervously, others gasped. For the first time, Karen looked powerless, but Alex, watching from his porch with a calm, unreadable expression, knew this was only the beginning, because Karen wasn't just going to explode, she was going to fight back. And the battle that followed would tear the entire neighborhood apart. But what happened when the HOA board confronted Alex about the missing cars would leave everyone stunned. The neighborhood was buzzing like a hive rattled by a stick. Word spread quickly. Every car on the newly private road had mysteriously disappeared overnight. People stood in their driveways, clutching coffee mugs, whispering to each other in disbelief. It wasn't just one or two vehicles. It was every single one. SUV, sedans, even the fancy sports car belonging to one of the HOA board members gone as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Karen was in absolute chaos. Her usual air of superiority had dissolved into frantic pacing. She jabbed her phone over and over, calling tow companies, calling her lawyer, even dialing 911. "Yes, officer, an entire street of vehicles has been stolen." She screeched into the phone. "All of them. They were parked here last night, and now they're gone." From his porch, Alex watched calmly, sipping his tea. He kept his face neutral, but inside, a quiet satisfaction flickered. Karen had weaponized the road to control everyone. Now, the road had turned into her worst nightmare. The police arrived within the hour, their flashing lights casting blue and red streaks across the shocked faces of the neighbors. Officers began questioning residents, jotting down notes, and surveying the empty road. One officer turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you're telling us every vehicle vanished. Do you have any surveillance cameras that might show what happened?" Karen's face twitched. She did have cameras, installed just last week, pointed aggressively at the road. She marched back into her house, dragging 2 officers with her. The neighbors waited in tense silence until Karen stormed back out, her face pale. "The footage is gone," she cried. "Someone tampered with it. The hard drive's been wiped." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors tried to hide their smirks. Others exchanged wide-eyed looks. One muttered under his breath, "Looks like Karen's kingdom isn't as secure as she thought." But Karen wasn't about to let the humiliation sink her. She whirled around, stabbing a finger toward Alex. "It was him. He's the only one who could have done this. He's been watching me for weeks. He's quiet, too quiet. It has to be him." The crowd turned, eyes flickering toward Alex. But instead of shrinking back, Alex stood, calm and collected. "Do you have proof, Karen?" he asked, his voice steady. "Because last I checked, false accusations are a serious offense." The officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, unless you have evidence linking this man to the missing vehicles, we can't assume his involvement. Right now, this is an open investigation." Karen's face burned crimson. "This is my road," she shrieked. "And my rules, and now all the cars are gone because of people like him who refuse to respect authority." The officer frowned. "Actually, ma'am, our records show this road is under county jurisdiction. Your HOA doesn't have the right to restrict access without county approval." That statement hit harder than any accusation. Gasps broke out again. Karen stammered, her clipboard trembling in her hands. "That can't be right," she muttered. "We voted. The board voted." But her words faltered as whispers grew louder. Neighbors began to see through the cracks. Karen's ownership of the road wasn't solid after all. The HOA board convened an emergency meeting that afternoon. It was held in the community hall, but instead of the usual calm discussions about lawn height or mailbox colors, the air was thick with tension. Every seat was filled, residents standing shoulder to shoulder, desperate for answers. Karen stood at the front, flanked by 2 board members. She slammed her clipboard down on the table. "Someone is trying to sabotage me," she announced dramatically. "They've stolen cars, tampered with cameras, and spread lies about my leadership. We cannot let this stand. I demand immediate action, investigations, fines, whatever it takes." But murmurs filled the hall. People weren't nodding in agreement this time. They were questioning, doubting. A resident raised his hand. "Karen, maybe the bigger issue here is that you didn't have the right to claim the road in the first place. The officer said it was still county property." Another chimed in. "And what about Mrs. Turner's car? You had it towed even though she's lived here longer than you." Karen's face twisted. She opened her mouth, but before she could lash out, Alex quietly stood from the back of the room. "I've been reviewing the county land records," he said evenly, his voice cutting through the tension, "and what I found is very clear. This road was never transferred to the HOA. It remains county property, and the paperwork Karen filed was incomplete, maybe even fraudulent." The room fell silent. Karen's eyes went wide. "You're lying," she hissed, but Alex calmly held up a folder of documents. "I'll be happy to show these to anyone interested, and if necessary, to the county clerk's office." The board members exchanged nervous glances. Karen's facade was crumbling, and she knew it. But before the room could fully turn against her, the door burst open. Everyone turned as a man in a suit strode in, carrying a thick file. "I represent the county zoning department," he announced. "We received a complaint regarding unauthorized road closure and property claims. We're here to investigate." Karen's knees nearly buckled. The neighbors gasped again. But what the zoning officer revealed next would shake the entire neighborhood to its core. The atmosphere in the community hall was electric. All eyes locked on the man in the navy suit as he calmly laid his folder on the board's table. The logo stamped on the front read County Zoning and Land Use Department. Karen stiffened. Her face, usually painted with smug confidence, now twitched with unease. She tried to recover, standing taller, smoothing her blazer and forcing a smile. Finally, she declared, "Thank you for coming. Perhaps now, someone in authority can confirm that this road belongs to the HOA and that we are within our rights to keep it exclusive." The zoning officer didn't smile back. Instead, he methodically opened his file, revealing pages of maps, property records, and permits. He adjusted his glasses, looked straight at Karen, and spoke in a firm but measured tone. "Actually, ma'am, that's not why I'm here. We've received multiple complaints about an unauthorized road closure and vehicle towing. Upon reviewing the county's records, I can state clearly, this road has never been under HOA ownership. It remains a designated county easement, open to public access." The hall erupted in gasps. Neighbors whispered furiously, some clapping hands over their mouths. Karen's eyes went wide, her hands clutching the edge of the table. That's not possible," she sputtered. "I filed paperwork. I held a vote. The HOA board approved it unanimously." The officer nodded. "You filed paperwork, yes, but you filed it incorrectly. The documents lacked required county signatures, and no transfer of ownership was ever finalized. What you created was a simulation of authority, not legal authority itself." Karen's composure cracked. "So you're saying all of this was for nothing?" The officer's gaze hardened. "I'm saying your actions may constitute fraud, and if it's proven that you knowingly misrepresented county property as HOA owned, there will be consequences." The silence that followed was deafening. The weight of the revelation pressed down on the room like a heavy blanket. For once, Karen had no quick comeback. From the back of the hall, Alex finally spoke, his calm voice slicing through the tension. "Neighbors, this is exactly what I was trying to point out earlier. Karen's ownership was never legitimate. She manipulated the process to make it look real. And in the meantime, families have been fined, cars have been towed, and lives disrupted, all because of a lie." Several heads turned, nodding in agreement. For the first time, Karen's support was visibly crumbling. Even a few board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, distancing themselves from her. Karen's lips trembled, but then her expression hardened. Her eyes darted toward Alex, and the familiar fire returned. "You," she snapped, pointing a trembling finger. "You're behind this whole mess. You've been plotting against me from the start. And don't think I didn't notice how conveniently those cars vanished the same night I tightened enforcement. This is your doing, and I'll prove it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd again, but this time the tone was skeptical, not supportive. People were no longer swallowing her accusations whole. The zoning officer interjected. "Regardless of who removed the vehicles, the county will investigate. If necessary, we'll subpoena towing records, review surveillance in the area, and contact every local lot. The truth will come out." Karen's face paled. She tried to mask it, but the idea of investigators digging into records made her stomach churn. Alex, standing calmly, folded his arms. He didn't flinch at her threats. He simply let the silence stretch until the neighbors began to realize what was happening. Karen wasn't in control anymore. But Karen wasn't one to surrender gracefully. She slammed her clipboard on the table, her voice rising in pitch. "Fine, if the county wants to investigate, so be it. But let me be clear, Alex is not innocent. He's been snooping, plotting, and manipulating behind the scenes. He must have helped know. One man could make all those cars disappear overnight." The zoning officer raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's an interesting theory, ma'am, and if you believe it, I suggest you provide evidence, because until then, your claims mean very little." The residents chuckled under their breath, the first sign that Karen's authority was truly slipping. Her cheeks flushed crimson. Still, even as doubt spread, Karen's determination only hardened. Her pride wouldn't let her back down. Later that evening, as the hall emptied and neighbors filed out, Karen cornered two board members in the parking lot. "We cannot let Alex get away with this," she hissed. "He's trying to ruin me. We need to fight back." One of the board members sighed. "Karen, maybe it's time we step back. This has gotten out of hand." But Karen leaned closer, her voice sharp as a knife. "No, if the county digs too deep, I'll be exposed. I need to flip the narrative before that happens. If Alex thinks he's clever, he hasn't seen anything yet." The board members exchanged worried looks, realizing Karen wasn't planning to let this die quietly. Meanwhile, back at his house, Alex sat at his desk, reviewing the stack of records he had gathered. He knew Karen wouldn't go down without a fight. She thrived on control, and the loss of it would only push her to desperate measures. He rubbed his temples, staring at the documents spread before him. His plan had worked for now, but the battle was far from over, because Karen wasn't done scheming, and her next move would take the entire conflict to a dangerous new level. But when a shocking discovery about the vanished cars came to light the very next day, the neighborhood would be thrown into even deeper chaos. The morning after the zoning officer's bombshell, the neighborhood was buzzing with speculation. People gathered on sidewalks in small clusters, whispering theories about the vanished vehicles. Some were convinced thieves had orchestrated a massive heist. Others suspected Alex had hired tow trucks to make a statement. A few even wondered if Karen herself had staged the disappearance to frame someone else. But no one expected what happened next. Just after sunrise, a low rumble echoed down the road. One by one, tow trucks rolled into the neighborhood, each carrying a familiar car. Gasps erupted as the first SUV was lowered onto the asphalt, followed by a sedan, a pickup, and more. By mid-morning, every missing vehicle had been returned, lined up neatly along the street as if they had never left. It was surreal. The owners rushed out, inspecting their cars. Miraculously, not a single vehicle had been damaged. Not a scratch, not a dent. They were pristine, almost too pristine. Karen stormed out of her house in a fury, her robe flapping behind her, hair unbrushed, eyes blazing. "What is this?" she screamed, pointing wildly at the trucks. "Who authorized this? Where have these cars been?" The lead tow operator, a burly man with a clipboard, barely glanced at her. "County order, ma'am. These cars were impounded improperly. Records show they were taken under false authority. We've been instructed to return them to their rightful owners." The neighbors erupted in applause. Some even whistled. For the first time, smiles spread across faces that had been tense for weeks. Mrs. Turner, the elderly neighbor who had cried over her towed sedan, actually wept tears of joy as her car was parked gently back in her driveway. But Karen was livid. She stomped toward the operator, her voice shrill. "You can't just barge in here and undo HOA enforcement. This is my road, my rules." The operator frowned, flipping through his paperwork. "Lady, according to this file, this road is county property. Your HOA enforcement doesn't apply here. If you want to contest it, take it up with the zoning department." The crowd snickered at his bluntness. Karen's face turned scarlet. Alex, standing quietly on his porch, allowed himself the smallest of smiles. He hadn't lifted a finger that morning. The county had done all the work for him, but Karen didn't see it that way. She spun on her heel and marched toward Alex, her finger jabbing the air like a spear. "This is your doing," she shouted. "You think you're clever, don't you, using county bureaucrats to humiliate me? Well, enjoy your little victory, Alex, because it won't last." Alex met her glare calmly. "I didn't do anything except tell the truth. Maybe that's what bothers you most, Karen." Her nostrils flared. For a moment, she looked ready to explode, but she caught herself. Instead, she smirked a dangerous, calculated smirk that chilled the air around them. "You want to play games," she said softly, almost sweetly. "Fine, but don't forget I know things too. And when I reveal what I know, you'll wish you never started this." The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. What did she mean? What did Karen know? The mystery deepened later that afternoon when an anonymous letter appeared in several neighbors' mailboxes. The letter, typed in bold black font with no signature, accused Alex of secretly orchestrating the car vanishings. It claimed he had connections with towing companies and that he staged the entire stunt to make Karen look bad. Whispers spread quickly. Some residents, still grateful their cars had been returned, dismissed it as another one of Karen's tricks. But others, still unsure about Alex's role, began to wonder. By evening, the community was divided. Half the neighborhood saw Alex as a quiet hero, the man who stood up to Karen's tyranny. The other half questioned whether he had gone too far, if perhaps Karen wasn't entirely wrong. And Karen, she thrived on the chaos. Watching neighbors argue among themselves, she stood tall, arms crossed, that dangerous smirk never leaving her face. But her game wasn't over. In fact, she was only just beginning to strike back. Because later that week, a county investigator knocked on Alex's door with a folder in hand. "Mr. Alex," the man said, adjusting his tie, "we need to talk. There are new developments in the case of the missing vehicles, and your name has come up." Alex's heart sank, though his face remained composed. He had known Karen would retaliate, but he hadn't expected her to move so fast. The investigator opened the folder, revealing documents, photos, and signatures. "Someone filed an anonymous complaint suggesting you coordinated the mass towing, and if that's true, it could lead to serious consequences." The neighbors watched from their porches as the investigator stepped inside Alex's home. The tension in the air was unbearable. Had Karen finally found a way to turn the tables? But when Alex showed the investigator the one piece of evidence Karen never expected, the entire case took a shocking new turn. The investigator's polished shoes clicked against Alex's hardwood floor as he stepped inside, clutching the thick folder of complaints. His demeanor was professional, but his eyes betrayed curiosity. He was used to neighborhood squabbles, but this one was something else entirely: cars vanishing, roads being claimed, accusations flying like wildfire. Alex offered him a seat at the dining table. Calm as ever, he poured 2 glasses of water, sliding one across. "Mr. Alex," the investigator began, adjusting his tie. "As I explained, there's been an anonymous complaint against you." The claim is that you coordinated with towing companies to remove vehicles illegally, staging this entire ordeal to make the HOA president look bad. Outside, neighbors lingered on their porches, whispering and craning their necks to catch any glimpse of what was unfolding inside. Karen stood across the street, arms folded tightly, lips curled in a satisfied smile. Finally, she thought, finally he'll be exposed. But Alex didn't flinch. Instead, he opened a drawer and retrieved a neatly organized folder of his own. "I've been expecting this," he said softly, placing the folder on the table. The investigator raised a brow, expecting it. Alex nodded. "Karen thrives on manipulation. If she couldn't silence me through authority, she'd try to bury me with accusations. That's why I kept records of everything." The investigator leaned forward as Alex spread out the documents. There were time-stamped photos, digital screenshots, and official correspondence from the county. Each piece told a story. Alex had been documenting Karen's actions from the start. Here was a photo of Karen directing a tow truck driver late at night, clipboard in hand. Here were emails Alex had sent to the county weeks before, warning of unauthorized road closures. And here the most damning piece was a receipt. This, Alex said, sliding it across, is a county receipt showing where the cars were actually taken. Not to some private lot I arranged, but to a county impound under a fraudulent request made by someone posing as HOA authority. The investigator's eyes narrowed. He examined the receipt carefully, then compared it with his own folder. The fraudulent request bore a name, Karen H. Alex leaned back, calm but firm. "So unless I've started impersonating Karen herself, I think we both know who orchestrated the disappearances." The silence that followed was heavy. The investigator tapped his pen thoughtfully, then closed his folder with a snap. "I'll need to cross-check this evidence," he said, "but if it holds up, this changes everything." Outside, Karen's smug confidence began to falter as she saw the investigator leave with Alex's documents in hand. Neighbors approached cautiously, asking Alex what had happened. He didn't boast, didn't gloat, he simply said, "The truth is coming out." That night, the community hall filled again, more crowded than ever. The investigator stood at the front with his file, the board members beside him looking uneasy. Karen tried to maintain her usual composure, but her clenched fists betrayed her nerves. After reviewing the documents, the investigator announced, "It appears the vehicles were not stolen, but rather redirected to a county impound lot under false pretenses. The paperwork authorizing the towing was submitted under the name of the HOA president, Mrs. Karen H." The room erupted. Gasps, shouts, even laughter filled the air. Karen's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she cried, slamming her palm on the table. "I never filed those. This is a setup." But the investigator continued. "The digital records confirm the submission came from your HOA email account. Unless you can prove it was hacked, you are directly responsible. Neighbors turned on her instantly. You towed our cars just to prove a point. You lied to us, Karen. You made Mrs. Turner cry." Karen's voice cracked as she shouted over them. "I did it for order, for control. This neighborhood was falling apart and I gave it structure. You should be thanking me, not turning against me." But her words fell flat. The crowd wasn't buying it anymore. From the back of the hall, Alex rose to his feet. His voice carried, calm but sharp. "Order doesn't come from lies. Control isn't leadership. You abused the trust of your neighbors, Karen. You used fear to rule over us, and now that fear is gone." The neighbors clapped, some even standing. For the first time, Karen looked small, cornered, desperate. But instead of crumbling, she lashed out. "You think this is over?" she hissed, her eyes locked on Alex. "I'll take you down with me. If I burn, you burn too." The board members shifted uncomfortably, the investigator scribbled notes, and the crowd erupted into uneasy murmurs. Because even though Karen was cornered, everyone knew one thing: she wasn't finished yet. She was too prideful, too desperate to surrender, and when she revealed her next move, it would shake the neighborhood more than anything before, because Karen had been keeping a secret one that would turn the entire conflict upside down. The tension in the hall was suffocating. Neighbors whispered, the board members avoided eye contact, and the investigator adjusted his glasses, preparing to regain order. But Karen wasn't done, not even close. Her eyes burned with fury as she slammed a thick binder onto the table. The sound cracked through the hall like a gavel striking judgment. You all think Alex is innocent, she spat, her voice trembling with rage. You think he's some hero, then explain this. She flipped the binder open, revealing page after page of printed screenshots, photographs, and notes. The neighbors leaned forward, squinting. These, Karen declared, are records of Alex making backroom deals. Deals to buy up properties in this neighborhood quietly, secretly, so he could replace families with rental units. That's right. While you all thought he was fighting for fairness, he was plotting to turn our homes into his personal empire. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few neighbors turned to look at Alex, their expressions uncertain. The board members, eager for a distraction from their own failures, leaned in with renewed interest. Alex's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He stepped forward slowly, his presence steady as he addressed the room. I wondered when you'd bring that up, Karen. Karen smirked triumphantly. So you admit it. You admit you've been scheming this whole time. But Alex shook his head. Calmly, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through his files until he found the document he needed. He projected it onto the screen at the front of the hall, using the board's own equipment. It wasn't a plan to buy out the neighborhood. It was a county development proposal, one Karen herself had signed months earlier. This, Alex said, pointing to her signature at the bottom, is the real story. Karen wasn't worried about me buying homes. She was working with a developer to sell off parts of the neighborhood herself. Those so-called records she's showing you, fabricated. She printed screenshots out of context, cropped emails, even edited photos, all to cover up the deal she was making behind your backs. The room erupted again, louder, angrier this time. Neighbors who had once whispered doubts now shouted their outrage. You were selling our homes. You lied about everything. You used us to get rich. Karen's smug expression shattered. Her hands trembled as she flipped frantically through her binder, trying to find something, anything that would save her. This isn't true, she screamed. He's twisting it. But the investigator cut her off. Mrs. Karen, the signature is clear, and the county has records confirming preliminary talks with developers your name attached. The weight of the truth slammed into the room like a storm. Neighbors who had once feared Karen now glared at her with venom. The board members shifted in their seats, suddenly desperate to distance themselves. Alex stood firm, but his voice softened as he addressed the crowd. Karen tried to turn us against each other. She wanted control so badly, she forgot what community really means. We can't let fear or greed guide us anymore. This neighborhood deserves better. For the first time, Karen's mask cracked completely. Tears welled in her eyes, not from remorse, but from the realization that her empire of control was crumbling before everyone's eyes. But then, her expression hardened. She stood tall, her voice rising above the chaos. You think you've won, Alex? You think this neighborhood will thank you? No. Without me, you'll tear each other apart. You'll drown in your own petty squabbles. You need someone like me to keep order. And when that order collapses, don't come crying to me. The room fell silent. Her words weren't just bitter, they were a threat. Karen grabbed her binder, shoved it under her arm, and stormed out of the hall. The slam of the door echoed like a warning shot. The neighbors turned back to Alex, their faces a mixture of relief and lingering unease. The battle seemed won, but Karen's departure didn't feel like defeat. It felt like retreat, because everyone knew someone like Karen didn't just walk away. She regrouped, she plotted, she struck back harder. And Alex sensed it too. As the cheers of the crowd rose, he couldn't shake the feeling that this war was far from over. Karen's secret weapon hadn't been her fake evidence. It was something darker, something she was saving for last. And when she unleashed it, the neighborhood would never be the same again. The night after the stormy HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt strangely calm. Too calm. Porch lights glowed, cars lined the curbs, and families tucked themselves in, but beneath the quiet, an uneasiness lingered. Karen hadn't been defeated. She had only withdrawn, and everyone knew she was planning something. Alex didn't sleep. He paced by his front window, scanning the street. His instincts screamed that the fight wasn't finished. And just before dawn, his fears came true. A fleet of tow trucks rolled down the road. Engines rumbled, chains clattered, and flashing amber lights pierced the darkness. The drivers climbed out, clipboards in hand. One by one, they hooked chains onto the neighbors' cars, ready to haul them away. Within minutes, the street exploded with chaos. People rushed from their homes, shouting in disbelief. "What are you doing? You can't just take my car. This is private property." At the center of it all, Karen stood tall, arms crossed, smirk firmly back in place. Her voice cut through the uproar like a siren. "These vehicles are parked on a road that doesn't belong to you," she declared. "As acting enforcer of HOA code, I have the right to remove them. If you don't like it, call your lawyers. By the time they arrive, your cars will already be gone." It was her final weapon. She couldn't win in the hall, so she brought the battle back to the pavement. But Alex had been ready. He stepped into the center of the commotion, holding up a thick folder stamped with the county seal. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. "Not this time, Karen." The tow truck drivers paused, uncertain. Alex handed the lead driver a copy of the document. It was an official declaration from the county land office, proof that the road was deeded to the neighborhood itself, owned collectively by the residents. "These vehicles are not trespassing," Alex said firmly. "They're parked on property that belongs to us. And here's the kicker: your contract with the developer, the one you tried to hide, it voided your authority the moment it was exposed. You're not the enforcer here. You're the trespasser." The driver skimmed the papers, then looked back at Karen. "Ma'am, if what he says checks out, we can't touch these cars. We could get sued." Karen's face drained of color. "No, don't listen to him. He forged that. He's lying, But the investigator stepped forward, this time with a sheriff's deputy at his side. The deputy held up his hand, silencing her. "It's legitimate," the deputy said. "We verified it this morning. These tow orders are unlawful. Karen, you'll need to come with us for questioning about the fraudulent evidence you presented yesterday." The crowd erupted, but this time not in panic. It was cheers. Neighbors clapped, hugged each other, and shouted Alex's name. For once, the community felt united, not divided. Karen, however, wasn't ready to concede. She broke free from the deputy's hand, glaring at Alex with eyes full of venom. "You may think you've beaten me," she hissed, "but people like me don't disappear. I am this neighborhood. Without me, you'll fall apart." Alex met her gaze steadily. "No, Karen, without you, we'll finally come together." The deputy guided her toward the patrol car, her protests fading into the early morning air. The tow trucks rumbled off, leaving the cars untouched. The neighborhood exhaled in relief. For the first time in months, peace seemed possible. Days later, the HOA board officially voted Karen out. A new committee was formed, one built on transparency and fairness. The residents organized a block party, not to celebrate Karen's downfall, but to celebrate each other the way neighbors should. Alex walked down the street that evening, children playing around him, laughter echoing. For the first time, the road felt truly theirs. Karen's reign was over. Her last move had backfired spectacularly, leaving her with nothing but a reputation in ruins. And the community, it didn't just survive, it thrived. Because when entitled power tried to divide them, they found strength in unity, and Alex knew this wasn't just about roads or cars. It was about standing up to those who thought control was more important than community. The neighborhood had taken back its freedom, and Karen, she was just a bitter reminder of what happens when someone mistakes authority for ownership. But as Alex turned in for the night, one thought lingered: would she ever try to come back? No one could say for sure, but one thing was certain: if she did, the neighborhood would be ready. And if you thought Karen's downfall was shocking, just wait until you hear the next HOA disaster waiting around the corner. Don't miss it. Hit subscribe now, because the next story might just leave you speechless.